Hi, and welcome to my Messy Muse, a place for kidlit peeps to embrace the messiness of their everyday lives. Through interviews with fabulous kidlit talent, editors, and agents who share their own personal struggles, we will inspire your kidlit journey. I'm your host, Michelle McAvoy, an author, attorney, and mom of two whose life is really, really messy. I turn it around almost every single day, and so can you. Welcome to episode 4 of my Messy Muse. This month I had so much fun interviewing Rob Vlock, a middle grade author with 2 fabulous middle grade novels out, Sven Carter in the Trashmouth Effect and Sven Carter in the Android Army. Take a listen to hear about his inspiration for some of his crazy, zany characters. Mr. Vlock, how are you?
I am doing well. Thanks so much, Michelle. It is great to be here. Well, I mean, I'm not here. I'm here. I'm not with you.
You're here
We're
virtually.
Separate. Yes, it's good to be here virtually.
We love the ability to do these things across various states. We can get together and have this fun conversation. So thanks so much for being on my Messy Muse. I'm excited to interview you. You have a fabulous middle grade novel out that is so crazy and so zany. And I can't wait to talk about it and let our listeners know a little bit more about it. So just a really quick intro. You have Sven Carter in the Trashmouth Effect, the first book that came out October 2017 with Simon Schuster. And then the second book in that series, Sven Carter in the Android Army, which just released this past October 2018 with Simon Schuster. It's so funny, so crazy. And for those listening, if you could tell us, Rob, a little bit about the book and the stories for folks perhaps that haven't read it yet.
Sure, I would be happy to. The Sven Carter books are all about a character who, as you may have guessed, is named Sven Carter. He is a very ordinary, typical, average 12-year-old boy, or so he thinks. He realizes that's not actually the case one day when he's out at the skate park with his best friend Will. Sven takes the biggest ramp in the skate park on his bike and he wipes out. And that's when his arm falls off, which is pretty weird, but it gets weirder because it then crawls across the pavement and reattaches itself to his shoulder, which is when he realizes he's not a typical, average, ordinary 12-year-old boy at all. He's actually an android, a robot that's disguised as a human, known as a synthetic or a tick for short, and he's been programmed to wipe out all of humanity. That's his reason for being. The only problem is he's actually a good kid and he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He grew up thinking he was human. All his friends are human. Everyone he knows is human. So he does not want to wipe out humanity at all. So he and his best friend Will and his classmate Alicia set out on a quest to stop Sven from destroying humanity. And they come into some pretty unusual situations along the way. They have to get by a 300-pound Chihuahua named Pumpkin. They need to fight killer roast chickens, which are really robots. They jump up off the plate and attack them. There are horrifying clown snakes, and it's a lot of fun and a lot of action.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of action in these books, and it's so funny. And you had mentioned the part where his arm falls off, which is in the very beginning of this first Sven Carter book, The Trashmouth Effect. And I have to say that scene was so funny and fabulous in the very beginning and just really drew me in. This one part, I'm just going to read it really quickly. After his arm falls off, it says, frantic thoughts buzzed around inside my skull like a swarm of angry hornets. Was I going to die? what would happen if I wanted to become a professional juggler? Like, I just literally laughed out loud when I read that, and I thought, oh my gosh, Rob Vlock is so funny and crazy, and I can't wait to. And I can't, because it really made me laugh out loud, because your arm falls off, and you don't think the fact that you thought about becoming a juggler was just so funny to me. So
yeah,
yep.
Crazy is an adjective that's used a lot in association with my name for some reason. I don't know why.
Before or after Sven Carter books came out, or just your entire life?
Probably my entire life.
Right.
Now
right.
it's kind of socially acceptable because I channel it into books.
Right, exactly. So what was your inspiration for writing the Sven Carter series?
Well, my very first book that I ever wrote was an adult novel, which never made it into print. It was almost made into a movie, which was a lot of fun dealing with. It wasn't really fun. It was actually horrible and awful, dealing with all the Hollywood types and thinking that, I was going to have this great movie made.
Yeah.
And it never happened. So that pretty much discouraged me initially from writing. But one day I was reading to my son when he was a bit younger, and I think I was reading a Harry Potter book, and it was past his bedtime, and he just begged me, Dad, please, can we read one more chapter, just one more? And at that moment, I said, you know what I want to do with my life? I knew I could write. I'd been doing it for a while. I said, I want to write kids' books so that I can inspire kids to say to their parents, please, just one more chapter. I wanted to write books that would get kids staying up past their bedtime. And then I had to figure out what to write. And since my son really loved books like the Harry Potter series or Percy Jackson books, I felt like something in that vein would be great. And what I tried to do was flip that whole trope on its head. So those books are all about Harry, who finds out he's a great wizard and has the power to do all these amazing things, and he gets to go to Hogwarts. And Percy Jackson, who finds out his father is a god and he's a demigod with all kinds of cool powers. Like, they find out these great things about themselves that make their lives really amazing. I thought with Sven, I wanted to do the opposite. He finds out something he didn't know about himself, but what he finds out is not great at all. It's actually like the worst thing you could possibly imagine. And that is, you are destined to wipe out all of humanity. And that was sort of the genesis of that idea.
So how long ago did this sort of epiphany where that you wanted to write for kids? I know you said you were with your son when he was much younger. How many years ago was that?
Oh, boy. That was probably about 2011 or 12. So about 6 years ago, I would say, was when I shifted gears and decided I didn't want to write for adults. I wanted to write for kids.
So did you start writing, Sven, back then in 2011, 2012? Or
no, I wrote something else first. So I had an agent already because of my adult novel who was representing that. And then when I decided to do Kid Lit, she was all for it, although she didn't have a lot of experience with it. So I wrote a book, wrote a manuscript, did some revisions, put a lot of effort into it. And she just did not feel it was going to go anywhere. So that was actually the very first book I wrote for kids. And the Sven idea I had thought of earlier than that and just never really did anything with it. I wasn't sure what to do. And so I came back to it after that first manuscript went nowhere. So that one's gathering dust. It'll probably never see the light of day.
Well, you never know. But, I think it was interesting how you had mentioned you were reading Harry Potter and you were sort of inspired by that book and Percy Jackson. I think it's important for folks to realize that, we don't write in a bubble, right? So it's good to read and to really get a feel for the genre or that you want to write in, and then you sort of can get different ideas and your own individual unique ideas from there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's essential to read, to just immerse yourself in what's going on in the genre, and even it's great to read outside the genre too. I find myself jotting down turns of phrase that I really like from adult books that I might be reading, or, even nonfiction. Sometimes something will just stick with me and I'll jot it down, and I won't steal it, but, I'll hold on to it and kind of use it to inspire me when I'm writing some prose. If it's a particularly nice turn of phrase, I'll say, oh, that's really nice. And what can I do that's sort of at that level?
Right.
And it doesn't matter where it's from. It can be from any source. It can be from the New Yorker, some article, if there's a particularly good turn of phrase, or it can be, again, from adult novels. It can be from a book about insects, which I happen to be reading right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could see that you need that inspiration with all of your crazy characters that you create in your stories and in your series. You talked about the Chihuahua. I know that we've talked before about that little guy in your second novel, the little centipede scorpion dude that sits behind Sven Carter's ear. You want to tell us a little bit about him? Tell us a little about him.
Yeah, Bing 808 is his name.
Right.
And he lives, originally in the story, he lives inside of a human-shaped flesh sack that's filled with hundreds and hundreds of scorpipedes. These are part centipede, part scorpion. They're synthetic. They're created by the ticks as part of their plot. And, this flesh sack, which is named Bing, allows these scorpipedes to travel around as a collective. No one knows what they really are until they get disgorged and can attack people. And Bing 808 is sort of the outcast in the bunch. He doesn't have a stinger. So the other scorpipedes don't really like him. They make him live in the little toe, which is not a very good neighborhood in the flesh sack. So he ends up, being he joins Sven and his friends and ends up being an unusual, unlikely ally throughout the story. But it's interesting because he was named after a cow, a steer, because it was a boy cow. Cows are girls. So my father-in-law owns a cattle farm as sort of a odd hobby. And he had a steer on his farm that had an ear tag that read 808. And this cow, steer, whatever you call him, this bovine was unusually friendly. He'd come up to us. We visited him. This was in Australia. He visited us at the fence, at the edge of the fence. He'd come up and he'd lick our hands. And he was just, all the other steers would be off on the other side of the pasture, and he'd just come up and hang out with us. So I wanted to, now that he's no longer with us, I assume he was probably really delicious, but he's no longer on my father-in-law's farm. I wanted to pay tribute to this very sweet animal with 808.
So only Rob Vlock would pay tribute to the very friendly yet delicious steer that licked his hand in Australia. So and the fact that, the term neighborhood in the flesh sack just came out of your mouth a few minutes ago. It just shows how sort of off the beaten chart, sort of the ideas are in this book, but in both of these books actually. But what's fabulous and fantastic about it is that it's just exactly what the readers in your age group that you're going for want and devour, right? I mean, so I assume that the age group for these, I would say, is starting at 8 years old, for maybe advanced 8-year-old.
Right. Well, I think an 8-year-old would probably be pretty comfortable with it. Definitely by 9, they're right in the sweet spot, up to probably 13, 14 years old. So there's definitely something in it for the younger readers, because there is so much action and comedy. Some of the deeper themes in it might not, that might go over younger readers' heads, but for older readers, there's a lot to think about what it means to be you, and to be an outsider, and to understand that you as a person it's more important what you do than who you are,
Yep.
that
Yeah.
our actions always speak louder than, the color of our skin or our outward appearance.
Yep.
And so I think older kids will get that out of it. Younger kids, I think, will just laugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's pure entertainment. And I think, you get there's a deeper message, obviously, in almost anything that you could write, right? But I think just the pure entertainment for the young kids, is what we really need nowadays too. Things are always so heavy sometimes. And even for the
Absolutely.
younger kids, yeah. And for parents that read to their kids at night, I know there are a lot of parents that read to their kids at night, not just picture books. But I've picked up and read your book to my son, and he's loved it, just to listen to me read it to him when he was a little bit younger. So,
Right.
because it's just so fun and zany. And then I know that you've talked about sort of your process when we talk about writing. Can you tell us a little bit about your process?
I can. My process is really very messy, which is appropriate for my messy muse, I guess.
Love it.
Yeah. So I am not a plotter. I do not know where I'm going when I sit down to write, and that's one of the joys of it for me. So I'll sit down. I try to write through a full draft as quickly as I can, and I let the story take me wherever it will. Sometimes it takes me to dead ends and I have to back up a little bit, but typically I can get through to the end, and then I worry about revising. So I actually have an informal rule. I don't always obey it, but I usually, with a middle grade book, I won't let myself go more than a chapter back. So if I'm working on chapter 10, I will only let myself read chapter 9 before I continue on chapter 10. I won't go to 8. I won't go to 7 unless there's something really important that needs to be changed. Okay. I save all that for the end. So basically, for me, the process, it's really important to keep forward momentum at all times. Otherwise, you get into this revision cycle and you don't make you don't add to the word count. You just keep rewriting what you've already written. And that never gets you to the finish line.
Right. You can get sort of on that revision hamster wheel and then just never get to, chapter 2, right? You could revise chapter 1 forever. And then, what's great about your novels, and I think what's also great for reluctant readers is that not only are they action-packed, but the chapters are short. Are very short and sweet, and you have those lovely cliffhangers. So is that all done? Is that done intentionally? Is that done in the first draft, or is that done later on when you're revising?
It is done intentionally. And I usually don't let myself move on to the next chapter until I have a good cliffhanger to end on, good ending point. And I think just naturally my cadence tends to lead me to these points of tension and suspense every 1,500 words or so. Now, part of it is engineered to be that way. I do try to steer action so that after 1,500 words, there's a good place to stop. These short chapters allow kids who may be intimidated by bigger books or longer chapters to have a stopping place. You can read a chapter in 10 minutes and keep going, ideally. But if you want to stop there, you stop there. And it's a great place to pick up. And ideally, it gets kids saying, oh, what happens next? So they want to pick it up again. But it's absolutely intentional. I try to make it really fast-paced, give them more or less bite-sized chapters so that they can just keep the momentum going.
Yeah, it's so fun. And then it's funny because you almost always have a really fun cliffhanger. And then one of them that really made me laugh in the newest novel, The Android Army, there's a lot of action going on. And you said, look, he cried, extending an arm toward a 3-story brick building. Do you see it? Right there. I looked eagerly to where he was pointing. That's when I saw, and then the next chapter. Absolutely nothing. And it just made me laugh so hard because I'm waiting. I'm like, what'd he see? What'd I see? And usually you'd stop at the end of, maybe if I'm tired, I stop at the end of the chapter. I'm like, I have to just turn the page. And it said, absolutely nothing. And I just thought that was so clever and silly.
Well, thank you. You can't do that too much because, if you kind of pull the wool over your reader's eyes too many times with that type of, surprise, I think they start to get a little annoyed. They start to expect you to do that. So you need to use it sparingly. And in that case, in that particular scene, seeing nothing was exactly the point of it. So one of the characters sees that there's nothing unusual going on, which in itself is unusual because there are unusual things happening everywhere else.
Right.
So in this one house, everything looks business as normal, and everywhere else, chaos is breaking out. So it's sort of suspicious. So seeing nothing there is actually seeing everything.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love it. So we talked about your inspiration for Sven Carter, but is there a character in your books that you identify with the most?
There is, and it feels like it's just, for me, I wish I could pick some unusual character, like I identify most with, one of the clown snakes,
Right.
Which in terms of how I look, my personal appearance, yeah,
No.
I probably look a little like a clown snake.
No.
But no, I mean, it's almost too expected, but I identify most with Sven Carter, with the main character. And that's because he is the ultimate outsider. He finds out that he is, as far as he knows, the only android on Earth. The only one of his kind. He finds out that's not actually the case later, but at first he really feels like he is such an outsider, and that's a theme that goes through both books, that outsider status and what it means to be unique. And for me, that was my high school experience in particular. I just felt like I didn't fit into any group. I did various things. I played in the band and, played some sports and, wasn't a terrible student. But I didn't feel like I could just identify and fit in with a group of people and be like, okay, Rob's a jock or Rob's a band nerd or whatever. I had so many varied interests and just didn't really fit in anywhere. And I felt like an outsider. So writing Sven was a natural thing for me because I felt a little bit like that kid who was the only one of his kind.
Yeah.
And didn't have a community of like-minded people. Yeah.
So now growing up, were you a science nerd? And I ask this because there's so much science in both of these books.
Yes, I was a total science nerd. Absolutely. I, from a very young age, from as early as I can remember, my father used to, he taught me to love science. And we used to go out together and collect pond water samples to look at under the microscope. And I remember one day he came to me really excitedly and said, I just learned there is a pond about 2.5 hours away from us where it's the only place in the country you can find a particular species of colonial rotifer.
Oh, my gosh.
It's usually rotifers, as you know, are solitary, but these...
As I know?
Yeah,
as you know? Okay. Yes,
and,
of course I do.
So we jumped in the car and drove out to try to find some of these colonial rotifers. And, it was that type of curiosity that my father inspired in me that I think, made me become a real science nerd. And it served me well, I think, in the Sven Carter series, because there is a lot of real science in it. Even though it's a very speculative novel, it's not realistic in most ways. A lot of the technology that I describe is stuff that we will be seeing come into reality in the not too distant future, whether it's artificial intelligence or nanotechnology. Sven and the Ticks have a sort of nano machine, formulation of their blood that carries nutrients around their bodies. And that's something that's actually used by, at cancer centers sometimes to direct these iron carbon nanomolecules into tumors to help destroy them and things like that. So there's a lot of real science in this, even though the premise is a bit out there.
Just a little bit.
And it's, it's all for me being a science nerd.
Yeah, and you know what? And I love that because these books really show that science mixed in with your creativity, mixed in with your just pure uniqueness, and what's sort of turn with the wheels that are turning around in your brain. So I really do enjoy the representations that you set forth in your novels. You did mention just a second ago cancer, and I don't want to bring an interview that's very high and fun down, but you are open with the fact that you are a cancer survivor. So, and on my Messy Muse, we do talk about a lot about sort of everybody struggles with something, and we want to try to turn that around and see the positive. And so, in what way did writing help you during your troubled times?
Right. Well, yes, I'm very happy to talk about it, and I'll try not to bring it down too much. I'll keep it happy and fun. Cancer usually isn't all that happy and fun, and it really wasn't. It really wasn't happy and fun for me. But
No.
But it was a messy muse for me. I was diagnosed with a very rare form of ocular cancer when I was in the middle of a rewrite of the first Sven Carter book. Before I had a publishing contract, I was in the midst of very heavy rewrites when I got this diagnosis. And, it's difficult to have a health problem. And a lot of people might retreat from a creative endeavor, particularly if it's fun and happy and very comedic. But for me, writing was just the ultimate respite from everything that was going on in my life. I didn't know what my prognosis was at the time. I didn't know what the treatment would bring. I should mention that the prognosis is very, very good. So there should be lots more weirdness coming from me over many, many years.
Yay! Yes, please.
But for me, it really focused me, and it both made me want to finish writing as soon as I could to have my book out there in the world. Yeah. But also it was just a delight to be able to sink myself into my writing and forget all about, any kind of medical procedures or worries about what would happen. And so for me, it was just wonderful, wonderful respite. And I am hoping to be working in the near future with kids at pediatric cancer centers to help them find some respite from the worries that they have, and dive into writing as a way to deal with their experiences and find some joy and some relief in their lives.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's very much about what, this podcast is about. And the great thing that you're able to showcase for everyone is that even though what you went through was very dark and very troublesome and problematic, your books are the antithesis of that. Excuse me, I can't speak. Or the complete opposite of that. They're fun. They're crazy. They're very uplifting. So I think the message is, even though you can write heavy and you can write sad if that's what helps you in your process. But if what helps you in your process is to write something completely off the wall, like, just go for it.
Right. Someone that I was on a panel with not long ago said that, we were talking about what role comedy has in literature. And it's you can feel a little insecure sometimes writing comedy because it's often not taken as seriously as the really heavy literature. You just don't find a lot of award-winning, ALA award-winning comic novels. But someone who was on a panel with me recently said that what kids really need are mirrors, windows, and escape hatches in their books. And that stuck with me. I thought it was so brilliant. So mirrors, absolutely, we get it. We want kids of all types to be able to see themselves in what they're reading. And that's really important, that kind of diversity of all sorts. And windows, great for seeing other people, for getting a window onto other worlds and other types of people. But escape hatches, those are what really appeal to me. And that's what I think the Sven Carter books are for kids. They let them escape their daily worries, stress. I mean, kids probably are more stressed today than they've ever been. They have more going on, all kinds of information coming at them every minute of every day from all different directions, social media, social issues on social media, all kinds of things that they have to deal with. And so being able to escape into a book, it's an escape hatch, is, I think, really important for them. And I've heard from teachers about kids who are having some, personal issues in their family life, and they've been helped by reading funny novels like Sven Carter, and that means everything to me.
You just gave me the chills, honestly, and it struck a chord with me, the whole escape hatch, because that's what, for me, what I use writing for. And I know, like, when my father passed, we used to watch Nick at Night, which is like the ultimate, like, silliness, right? But it was just, you need lightness in your life when you're going through something heavy, and you need to just be able to escape, or it's almost unbearable. So I think people forget that kids need that too, and we like to give them the resources and the heavy read, and to make them see that they're not alone and that other people are going through what they're going through. But sometimes these kids, all they really need is to laugh and to feel like a kid.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we have to remember that as well, because we all just want to do what's best for them, and we have to remember that as well. So that's a fantastic point. And so before we wrap this up, Rob, I have one last question, and that would be, what is your one piece of advice that you would give to folks that are listening that maybe want to get into, that want to write, that want to be published, that want to break into the industry? What is that one? I know you probably have a whole slew of things that you can teach and tell, but give us one piece of advice that you would give to them.
Does it count if I say don't do it?
No.
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 So, I joke about that, but writing is a difficult business. It's, you're constantly putting yourself out there for criticism, from whether it's when you're querying to try to find an agent, whether you find an agent and are getting passes from publishers, or you get a book deal and your editor is making you kill your babies. You really love what you wrote, and you're having to make some really difficult choices. Or even after publication, you might get some really harsh reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or from trade publications. So it would be really easy for a writer to give up, at any point during the process, whether it's trying to finish one's first manuscript, because it can be difficult. You can come up against some real speed bumps, or even brick walls that are so hard to get by when you're writing, that might lead you to abandon your quest to finish the novel. So all that being said, what I think is the most important quality that any writer can have is perseverance. I think that if you stick with it, and you keep going, and you develop that thick skin, and you just keep working at it, that you can get somewhere. And that's probably the quality that most differentiates successful writers from unsuccessful writers. It is perseverance. Very few people write a first novel, get it out there, and become a bestseller. Most people never become a bestseller. Right. But you certainly won't if you don't keep at it and keep working at it. So perseverance, persevere. Those are the three pieces of advice I would give.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob, for being on My Messy Muse. I had so much fun interviewing you. We're friends, but I really did want more people to see and understand how much fun you are, and how and to really read your book. So for those folks that are listening that haven't read your books yet, please go out and get them. They're available where all books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you do read the books, please do, and you like them, leave reviews. That's one of the best ways to say thank you to an author, leave a good review on Amazon or Goodreads. And for the Messy Muse members, you will be giving away copies of your latest book to one winner that likes this interview during the month. Yay! So thank you so much for being on, Rob. I had so much fun.
I did too, Michelle. Thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Don't wait for tomorrow.
Thank you for listening. To connect with the My Messy Muse community, please visit us on Facebook at My Messy Muse. To learn more about my books and how to work with me, please visit my website at michellemcavoy.com. That's Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-E, McAvoy, M-C-A-V-O-Y.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep on chasing the sunshine.